incident was about to take place that would shake the foundations of the civilized world.
It is time to open your mind. Time to discover your divine self as we navigate this holographic matrix together. Strap in, Cosmic Family, as we slide through this wormhole of cosmic information together in search of the truth.
You can't handle the truth!
It's time to go inside the Matrix.
Inside the Matrix.
With your host, Jimmy Brent.
All right, welcome to Inside the Matrix, where we explore and analyze our lives inside the Matrix control system. Today, we are honored and excited to have our guest, Geraldine Orozco. Geraldine is the founder of the Bay Area Meditation and Space Meditation Studio in San Francisco, California. She is also an international speaker, radio host, pranic, quantum, and shamanic energy healer. She is an Akashic intuitive, meditation expert, collective trauma researcher, and archetypal social theorist. She is currently writing her first book on DNA origins and the hybridization and ascension program. Geraldine has an amazing story to tell about her life, which is fascinating, and she'll be sharing that with us today. Welcome to the show, Geraldine.
Hi, Jimmy.
There she is. Hi, Geraldine. How are you?
Hi, I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, I'm really excited to share your information with our audience today. I first saw you a few months ago on Miles's YouTube channel, the Base's YouTube channel, and I was absolutely fascinated by your story. And I want you to, share your journey with our listeners, and however you want to do that. Just maybe go back and give us a kind of an update on where you've journeyed and how you've gotten to the place where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. We can start my story. I mean, before I got into any of this, I was not in any of these fields. I mean, I wasn't in the field of, talking about hybridization or ET contact at all. My past life consists of, 10 years in the event planning field. I had my own business, and I also had Bay Area meditation, which I teach corporate meditation in the San Francisco Bay Area to high-tech companies like Google, Facebook. And, that was my life. And in the early years of that, I was very curious about the healing arts and fascinated by the concept of, meditation and how meditation heals or helps center us. But, I out of curiosity, I decided to get certified in pranic healing when I was in China, and quantum energy healing. I also got training in Qigong. And all of those things were very beautiful, but not on the level. I mean, my level of understanding was completely changed when I had my contact experience in 2013. And it wasn't in 2013 that I had this abduction experience taken out of my bedroom window at 3:33 in the morning in Union City, California. And during that time, the experience was just overwhelming. I mean, I was brought on craft by six tall grays who introduced me to my hybrid children. And the introduction to the hybrid children was one of the most impactful memories that I will ever have in my life. I mean, the memory of that experience is something that is, in other words, realer than real life. The ability to see children that were basically of you, from you, was just incredible.
Now, would you say that you instantly knew that they were your children? And was this experience in sort of a dream state, or what type of state were you in?
Yes, this was actually waking state. And the way that it happened is that at 3:33 in the morning, I wake up all of a sudden to a bright light in my room. And, I was startled by the light because I thought somebody had been trying to either come into my house, or somebody was, directly trying to get my attention from outside. I thought it was a car. I live on kind of a curved street. and I didn't know what was occurring. And when I look out my window, in order for that car light to shine its light into my room, it would have to be on the other side of the street at an angle, really specifically shining their car lights in my room. But that was not the case. I mean, the light was so incredibly bright that when I looked through my blinds, the mini blinds in my window, I mean, the light just it got even brighter, and literally it was so bright that I had to squint. I couldn't even see through the light. And beyond that, I could see the metallic ship, the craft in front of me on the side. And as before I know it, my entire body is paralyzed, and I'm basically being taken out through my window to the other side in front of these 6 grays. And of course, it was very, very traumatic, at the moment, it was terrifying. And, I couldn't speak. I was paralyzed. I couldn't speak. I couldn't yell. I couldn't do anything other than move my pupils. And even the feeling of fear was then removed from my body.
Wow.
As one of them approached me and basically waved their hand and said, calm, be calm, that it was a telepathic communication to come into a state of calm. But,
Wow.
And it was basically imposed on my body. And as I'm brought into the craft, I mean, everything is so vivid, and I have some drawings of them, but everything down to the detail of the craft and everything is so vivid as I'm coming in, and they holographically change the surroundings. They will change what it looks like. It was almost as if you're inside of a 3D holographic projection that surrounds you. And you can clearly see that, things are moving, things are shifting, and the environment is changing. One moment I am being shown green grass and blue skies, and my aunt is crossing in front of me in her nightgown.
Wow.
And the next moment they shift the image, and it's the inside of the craft. And, in detail, I'm looking at what seems to be a control system, their panels, and looking outside what seems to be like a glass window or translucent metallic kind of substance that you can see through, basically. And, everything is just vivid, very full of light. And I'm shown a lot of different information. I'm shown information about I don't know if it's a parallel life or a past life that I'm being shown at that moment. And that's when I was introduced to the children. And they show me 8 little yellow lights. And from the 8 of them, they present to me four actual children in front of me. And the connection to them is just overwhelming. I don't have children here on Earth. So seeing these children in front of you and feeling that maternal instinct kick in so powerfully that, these are your children, they come from you, you recognize them, they recognize you, and there's an immediate telepathic emotional connection to them it's just overwhelming. And at that moment, the concept or the question of how they came to be, it doesn't actually cross my mind at that moment until later, And so the very next day, I am basically on the end of my bed, upside down, with all my sheets open, and waking up like that would never occur ever. So,
Wow. Now,
that was the thing. Mm-hmm.
Would you say, or do you have any sense that possibly on another frequency or another dimension that you are involved with these children regularly, or that you're their mom, you're raising them, somewhat similar to what you might do on Earth? Or is it just the DNA spiritual connection? Do you feel like that you've been involved with their lives at all?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and it's a complex one, and it helps us kind of understand what the hybridization program is, or question it, at least begin to question it. These children, when I met them, the initial impact of having that connection, or even the concept of even having hybrid children, is just out of this world, literally. And but that was the first time I had met them or recalled meeting them, because this was a very conscious experience. It was something that I remembered and I was, clearly experiencing. And I mean, I have not connected with them after this event, this experience. Although I've had many other experiences of different kinds afterwards. I've had my lab experience. I've had other kinds of contact experiences that were different, but none that were like this. Now, in 2017, years after this experience, I finally got a regression. And my regression actually allowed me to experience and review contact experience that I have had since 5 years of age. So since 5 years old, implantation processes, and I discovered that I was a part of 24 hybrid programs. 24 hybrid children resulting from 4 different hybridization programs. So, what that means is that there were several times in my life where I was taken on craft to contribute and participate in certain aspects of the hybridization program. Also, I say 4 different hybridization programs because of the type of children or the product that was produced from my biological matter in combination with, other genetic material, which is, of course, extraterrestrial. The children that I was presented to in that experience in 2013 was more humanoid type children, perhaps mixed with grays and reptilian. And how I know that is how, by identifying the children and, describing how they look, I mean, they had very frail skin, kind of grayish, tremendously huge enlarged eyes, about the pupil about the size of our occipital sockets, our eye socket about that size.
Mm-hmm.
And, and there were also the reptilian children that were half humanoid, half reptilian. And how I know that is by the texture of their skin, almost, kind of merging from human skin into like reptilian scales around the upper part of their body, around the neck. Different parts of their body were holding on to these, aspects of themselves that were more reptilian-like. So, this is how I know that what these are is a product of genetic modification, very complex genetic modification. So my involvement with these children, of course, throughout my life has been several aspects, but primarily for me that I can consciously remember and that I recall through regression were once in a nursery as a child. And there were other adults there and other beings that, create this nurturing connection. And I think the purpose of that is the insemination process first provides a vibrational signature and also provides the kind of information required to produce this product, which will be the child. But any other visitation times that are, scheduled or designed by them is in order to create a nurturing environment, I guess, create imprint of emotional information within the child, as we all do. I mean, we all experience these imprints of emotional information based on our experiences. So in that same way, I believe that they're collectively contributing to the development of these hybrids, in other words.
Now, would you say, did you have any feel or indication of what their life might be like there? Did they live solely on the ship? Did they have a home base, like an Earth that they were growing up on, so to speak? Did you have any indication or feel for that, or the tall grays that you interacted with? Did you get any idea about their lives and how they live their lives?
Yes, thank you for that question. I mean, these hybrids, so for example, I've been a participant of 4 different hybridization programs. What does that mean? It means that each one of these programs or agendas led by the select species, one of which was a draconian species, one that was a reptilian, one that was more of a humanoid, something that we can relate to as a Pleiadian, and another program was a MyLab, which is a terrestrial MyLab program. And so each one of these are made to create these genetically modified children. And the purpose of the children are going to vary based on the program and the agenda and also the vibrational, I guess you can say, agenda, overall agenda of each program. And what do I mean by that? For example, the draconian children that were created, are these beings that are extremely low frequency beings. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so they will necessarily manifest, maybe not even in physical form. They will be some kind of what we may visualize as maybe like a monster or a reptile or something that we can probably not fathom in this physical dimension, or maybe something closer to a reptile or a dragon or something like that that is difficult for us to comprehend. How I have understood this is during the hybridization program as growing up, around from 16 up until 25, I was a part of this draconian program. And how they carry out their program is by inserting technology within the body that creates an environment that's very specific to be able to sustain the embryo that is a product of this genetic modification, because otherwise a human person, a human woman, would not be able to gestate something like that because of the vibrational frequency of this genetic modification. So, these are very carefully, designed programs that basically the body is prepared for the growth specifically of this vibrational being that's being created. So the agenda overall, the product of that, when they are removing then the fetus and, completing, usually the fetus is removed up to 3 months of gestation in the body, and then continue to develop, usually in incubation tanks within, their prospective, I don't know, you can say their ship, I mean, their craft, their, laboratories. And I myself, through regression, have been on a draconian hybridization ship, as well as, a more humanoid ship. And in these experiences, what is most vivid and memorable to me is the vibration and the emotions that we pick up as humans. I mean, on a draconian craft, being on the hybridization, the energy is so dark. It's the only thing I can compare it to is if you can combine all the most horrific things that you could ever think of, it gives you that sensation, that very low frequency, fearful emotion. And that's kind of what is produced when we are in the presence of these beings or in this kind of a craft, this environment. So
Now,
that will give you an idea. Yes. Mm-hmm.
well, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just wondering, is this an artificial insemination that takes place to gestate the embryo?
That's correct. It's an artificial insemination which is done within the body. However, there are different kinds of, techniques that are utilized. Sometimes genetic material is removed from the woman. So, for example, the egg is removed from the female, in the same way that they take genetic material from the male, and then they do something that's like the in vitro, for example, where they, take it into a petri dish. And usually this is what occurs, and then it's put back into the body, Or
Okay.
the insemination is done through the process of a screening of either sexual experience where there will be intercourse, and it's very complex. It depends on what agenda it is. The lower frequency agenda, which means either the draconian or reptilian. In my particular case, this is not to say that the reptilians are specifically all lower frequency beings. It doesn't mean that their agendas are all dark. As humans, there is a range of beings, a range of psyche and expression. So they can be either low frequency or high. It just depends on their specific agenda. And so whatever is being produced from them is then, going through a gestation process, and then when the child or the baby is then born, it is then bred into these specific agendas and basically raised, with the set of laws or rules or whatever it is that they're made to be, they're produced for. They're trained within that, school or whatever education they're to receive. Now,
Did you, did you,
a couple, yes.
I'm sorry, did you get a sense of what the purpose was of, you know, breeding in this way, or what was the objective that they had in this hybridization between, say, the draconians and yourself?
Yes, there's a couple objectives, and it depends on the process, the process of insemination. When the conception process occurs, a tremendous amount of information, energy is produced the moment that conception is created. That is when there's that moment of the insemination, and that moment it creates this incredible vibrational signature, and that happens for us humans here when we're procreating, when we are also in the process of having children, when we are with our partners and we go through the process of intercourse. The moment that conception occurs is a very powerful vibrational signature that merges two lineages of information: the mother, the father, okay, the woman and the man, and these two produce very important information that will then develop into whatever is being created. So when in genetic modification, what is occurring is that they're combining several different kinds of species. Our genetic code holds on to massive amounts of information, and that information is actually holographic. That holographic information is holding on to imprints of lineages, ancestral connections, genetic information of these lineages, of the species, the historical development of those species. So much information that is then put into the genetic creations that are then being produced. So when these children are born, for example, they have access to this information through their own genetic code. Just like us humans, our genetic code holds on to massive amounts of compressed information that we have yet to understand. And the more we learn about, understanding DNA, like right now we are in the process of studying what dark DNA represents, which is, our biologists are categorizing DNA in certain categories, but the information that they're able to produce, to translate, is very limited right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I was talking about at UFO MegaCon this year. My presentation was on holographic DNA, understanding that DNA is the currency of the past, the present, and the future, because even Silicon Valley right now is studying DNA to mimic the storage ability that DNA code has. Okay, in one teaspoon of this genetic code, you can store the entire lifespan information, the entire historic of the planet. Okay, we'll continue.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to take a short break here, and we'll be right back in just a few minutes with Geraldine Orozco.
Welcome to the desert of the real. Your ambassador to the unknown and host of Inside the Matrix, Jimmy Brent.
Okay, welcome back to Inside the Matrix with our guest today, Geraldine Orozco. We've got some really great information that Geraldine is sharing, and we're so excited to have that. First, we got a question from Susan in the chat, Geraldine, if you would mind just briefly answering her question. She was wondering how the hybrid babies are born, or if they are born, or how does that work?
Yes, great question. There's a couple of ways that they are born. For me, for example, several of the fetuses that were removed from me, from my experience, are taken out and put into incubation tanks. Incubation tanks are made to mimic the womb. And if I can share the extent of this kind of programs, in one of my experiences, I saw walls and walls of these kind of spherical tanks. Okay, so we're talking about many, many of them, and so that was one instance. And so what happens is that the child is then incubated there until the 9-month period. And again, because these are genetically modified, usually the gestation process is sped up or slowed down depending on the product that is being created, how this specific species is developing. I have seen cases where immediately the child is basically brought into full term as they put it into incubation tank within a month, 3 months, or even hours. Okay, this is how advanced the technology is. Another way that I have seen and also experienced is at a hybridization ship. What is interesting is because we're talking about interdimensional beings here, we're talking about the ability to move in and out of dimensions. When a woman is a contactee, she is we are living out our human experience here on this planet. So in the human experience, we're experiencing something, but we are also moving in and out of dimensions simultaneously. So we may also experience things on other dimensions. And the reason why I feel it's important to share that is because this is where things start to blend, things start to merge. So for example, I will experience being pregnant. I will, start to gestate the child. My pregnancy test will come out positive, and then all of a sudden I will have what looks like, what feels like a miscarriage, but there is no fetus. And so what is occurring is that at that moment the fetus was then removed at some time. That's my reality on this dimension. Now, I've also seen hybrid parents that are brought onto craft, and they're not showing fully pregnant here in our physical dimension, but when they're brought on craft, it's as if their term is accelerated into full term, and they are then either given birth there on craft. I've seen how they remove the fetus from the body, usually earlier than 9. It's not usually a full term. Anywhere between, the time of conception up until 6 months maximum is when I've seen this. And the child is then removed from the body, and the body is then returned. Usually, the body just comes back to its normal, normal self, and the woman will experience here in real time. We're going to experience that we had a miscarriage, or something like that. So, it's an emotional roller coaster for a lot of women, and it was for me because, in times when I was with my partner, we would think, oh my gosh, very exciting to become pregnant, but then there would be a miscarriage. Other times when I wasn't partnered at all and I would be pregnant, that was also very stressing. We wouldn't understand. The doctor would basically say that it's stress or anxiety. So this is how they are brought into life, and different agendas will use those children in different ways. They will. Some of the lower frequency agendas are using these beings as interdimensional connections. Now, the reason why I was explaining genetic information previously and how DNA holds information is because we are a product of our genetic code. Just like these hybrids, when they come in into reality, they're coming into their perspective dimension, which could be this physical 3D realm, or they can come into these other dimensions on craft or on other planets perhaps, and they are designed specifically to carry out these specific agendas. So some of these hybrids are created for more high vibrational. What I mean by high vibrational is maybe they're coming in with tweaked genetic code in order to have more abilities, more psychic abilities, more healing abilities. This is just an example, to give you an example of what it means or what it could represent to be high vibrational. Let's say a lower frequency agenda is then creating these lower frequency beings that are more of a parasitic kind of organisms, which would maybe drain energy or are what we can think of as attachments, or entities. Mm-hmm. That's also being created with our genetic code. And the genetic code will define their ability to navigate or traverse through dimensions. You asked me earlier if these beings are interdimensional or, extraterrestrial, and, they are basically both for the most part, because I mean, in this, even this current moment, me, you, and all of our listeners, we are constantly moving in and out of dimensions, and that is just the natural function of our structure, of the architecture of this reality. Everything down to the molecular level is oscillating to create a kind of a toroidal field that is then communicating in a network of information with the surrounding molecules. And, whether that's going to create a wall or it's going to create, your arm, the coding is what defines what is being created. So we are constantly moving in and out of these dimensions, sharing information with what's surrounding us, in other words.
Is there a way? Is there a way to tap into your own DNA knowledge? Is there a process, a technique? Have you discovered any way for us to do that?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for asking that, because that's one of the most important parts of what I am here to share, is to understand how to utilize the technology of this physical body. Our bodies are one of the most advanced biotechnologies. And what we are understanding is that down to our DNA level, we are storing massive amounts of information, which is storing the aggregate information from everything that you as consciousness have experienced since the conception of your creation, or the existence of your consciousness, which is infinite, obviously. And what we are basically in these physical bodies are just fractals of infinite consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
This infinite consciousness that is projecting into this physical three-dimensional body is literally a projection that we're creating. Not only are we projecting our reality, but we are projecting each other's reality as we share, we co-create this reality right now. So what that means is that what we're pulling from into this present moment is from that code, from that, let's say, an algorithm that's running in the background of all the experiences that we have experienced in this conscious manifestation of you. So you, Jimmy, me, Geraldine, all of my experiences. And when this consciousness comes into this three-dimensional world, when we are basically incarnating into the physical, what happens to that infinite consciousness is that it basically fragments. And a way that I can kind of depict that for you is if you can visualize a prism with white light shining through a prism, it fragments into a spectrum of color. That spectrum of color is what we call in the human body the chakra system. So in that same way, that light, yes, in the same way that white light, that infinite white light that holds all of the ranges of frequency, all of the ranges of color, all of the ranges of information, that infinite consciousness is brought into the physical body and fragmented into an organized system called the chakra. And that chakra system is connected to your endocrine system and so on and so forth. It's a very beautiful design. But the chakras are holding on and organizing all of that information, not only of your infinite, expression, but also it is connecting to now the human dimension. And in our human dimension, we have the physical body. Now, what does the human body consist of? It consists of our DNA, that genetic code that we were talking about. That genetic code is connected to your ancestral lineage, which is of course connected, and your DNA is created and programmed by the information that your mother and your father have aggregately combined to create you. So what we are is a product of all of the information that we are in this physical three-dimensional timeline brought through our father and our mother, and the information that we are as a much larger infinite consciousness, which will provide us information for other aspects of ourselves that we are living through simultaneously. So it's very interesting. It's a very complex system, but if you understand just that right there, you understand that the information that you're living out, all of these perceived experiences that we're experiencing right now, sharing, are basically all coming through the filing cabinet, let's say, that is being brought up through our past experiences and also the information that were genetically brought down through our ancestral lineage. So all of the things that we have learned, or all the experiences your mother and your father have had, create who you are, create your perception, will feed your understanding of reality, of course. And so when we talk about this kind of genetic information and code and how to clear it up, our work here, as we are perceiving and projecting into reality, is all being fed by that information. So if we learn how to work with that information, we can either clean up, change, transform all of that genetic coding into something different. And that is the only way that we can simplify that concept is by transforming lower frequency information into higher frequency information. And that is done through reprogramming of those concepts, of those perceptions that you're holding on to in your genetic code, in other words.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it really brings to mind, there's a gentleman in Australia who has brought forth a technique called holographic kinetics. And it's based on what his grandmother, who was an Aboriginal in Australia, what she taught him, the method that the Aborigines, how they dealt with people. Whenever somebody did something that they considered to be negative, if they stole something or something crazy happened, they would sit this person down, put them in a meditative type state, and determine what the cause was. Was it another entity attachment? Was it some type of DNA karma or something along those lines? And they would deal with it and then reprogram whatever that experience was or get rid of the entity to correct the situation. But during the process of doing that, they were also clearing the energy and that particular trauma, whatever it was, in all past lives, in all past ancestors and future ones, which I found absolutely fascinating. And I feel like that's exactly what you're trying to say, too, with the healing process.
Right. Yes, exactly. And that's what happens. I mean, when we go through a healing process, what I do is something called DNA reprogramming. And what I do with my clients is that I take them back to a memory, any memory, something that happened last week, something that happened a month ago. But what will happen is that, through our experience, through our everyday experiences, we are triggered through the memory body. I mean, our bodies are triggered emotionally through experiences. And those triggers are so incredibly valuable because they help us understand patterns of thoughts that we are holding on to, that we're living through. Now, when you take that pattern of thought, when you take that trigger, the emotion that is invested in that moment, you will identify it physically, emotionally. And the physical aspect is what is holding on to that amount of information, massive amounts of information from that experience. So I'll take my client to a memory. They're going to identify the emotion that is occurring at that time, and that emotion will trigger an imprint of the original moment when that emotion first came into their consciousness. And when you trigger and when you access that information, it really allows you to understand other experiences that were being held there with other players, like, for example, your mother or your father or someone else or your friend, girlfriend, whatever it is. And as you start to dissect that information, understand the root cause of it, it opens up not only your programming that's created in that moment, but the programming that is created from those around. And as you clear up all that information, as you replace and rebalance the perception of that experience, you are also rebalancing it for them. So it's very interesting. I mean, information, basically energy can never be erased. It can never be deleted. So what happens is that you reallocate that energy. That's all you're doing. So if you can visualize the physical body like this giant network that, the easiest analogy I can give you is that it looks kind of like a spider web, and you're at the center of that spider web. Each point that is coming from that center point of a spider web is basically a fragment of yourself. And that fragment is a time and space in your memory. However, there is no past or future. The thing is that all of these things are happening simultaneously. you through your memory body, through your emotional body, will also access other fragments of yourself, which could be extraterrestrial fragments of yourself. They could be, something from the past, a past life. That's why, in hypnotherapy, a lot of us, we access past life memories, and we're able to heal a lot of present day traumas, present day issues, because we're accessing the timelines, which are not linear. These are things that are occurring simultaneously. So, we then have the ability of clearing up all the way to ancestral things. And one of the gifts that were given, I guess, as a result of my abduction experience in 2013 was the ability to see the multidimensional body and to see these ancestral connections. The Monday after my experience, I had my, first meditation client, and when I sat next to them, it was just overwhelming. I could see absolutely everything, their entire multidimensional body.
Wow.
I could see the layers of their energy body, their, whatever they were holding on to, masses of color, darkness, light. I could feel their emotions. Everything that they were imagining, I could see. And it took me, weeks to get readjusted to this ability, because it was, at first it was almost sickening and overwhelming. But it was through that I learned and understood how we store this information, how we process, how we hold on to this blockages in the physical body.
Okay, we've got a question. We've got a question from Glenn on Twitter. He was asking, have you heard about any men involved in this hybrid program? At any time, did you see any men that were had sperm taken from them as part of the program, or is this basically a female-based program with these hybridizations?
Absolutely, Glenn, and thank you so much for asking that question. It's so important that we acknowledge the men, because absolutely the hybridization program is actually happening to both women and men. And I'm going to take it a step further, but first, I'd like to point out some of the very common, signs that you are participating in the hybridization program, something that I keep hearing over and over again. Now, the men will experience a little bit different experiences when they are taken. They will experience either dreams, visions, or conscious experiences, either on craft or in any kind of environment where they are being made to have intercourse. And a lot of times what I hear is the intercourse will either be with another woman, it could be another terrestrial woman, or seemingly another terrestrial woman. And the reason why I say seemingly is because some of these experiences are also screened images, which means that they are holographically created pulling from the subject's subconscious mind to create this illusion of a female in which this, he will then have intercourse with in order to, get the semen and the genetic material. But when a lot of times what happens is that the men will then experience that in the middle of intercourse with these beautiful women or any woman, the screen image will then fuzz out, and what you'll see is actually, let's say, a reptilian face or another ET face beyond that. And so, that happens a lot. It happens a lot in these ET contact experiences. In the hybridization program. That's one way that this is occurring. Another sign that's more subtle is that men, at a, older age, they will experience waking up with wet dreams, for example, and they won't know, what happened or how they resulted in that. That's something that's very common. And a lot of times this is not just that you wake up with this, but, it's combined with sightings. Like, for example, you have a sighting the night before of a craft, or, you have a flash or an image of ETs that would not normally come into your consciousness. It also is combined with missing time. For example, you experience, one moment you're engaged in an activity, the next moment you come back into consciousness, and hours at a time have passed by and you don't know, what happened or where you were. This is also another common sign. Now, from the physical level, the body will also show some marks, and this happens for women and men. Sometimes they have some scar tissue in their genital area or somewhere in the body. Very specifically, a lot of times it's in the wrists or in the back and the upper side of the calves. Also marks within the body wherever there have been implants or wherever, maybe material was removed. So it really just depends. There's many aspects to this. And so if you feel that you are a part of the hybridization program, you're experiencing some of these symptoms, this is kind of like a review that you can kind of do. Take a look at what your dreams were. A lot of the experiencers experience dreams, very vivid dreams of either seeing ETs, seeing craft, something like that. That's not something that's necessarily normal. I mean, for me, for example, the ETs or aliens were nowhere near my reality when this happened to me. That's the thing. I mean, I wasn't even interested in sci-fi films. I wasn't interested in the topic at all. And so when this happened, I mean, my paradigm was completely destroyed, shattered, changed completely. And it took me, many years to kind of understand what happened until I had my regressions. And then all the information came out. So regression is a very powerful tool for you to kind of go back to those memories and help you identify what's actually occurring.
All right, that's great. We're coming up fairly close to the break. We've still got about a minute to go here, but I definitely want to touch on the idea that some of these beings, especially the ones that have a darker agenda, could be interfacing with our world governments. And if there's, in fact, a connection with psychopathy, which a lot of these world leaders seem to exhibit, is related to these interactions with some of these dark agenda beings. I'm really curious about that, and hopefully, we can touch on that after the break.
That'd be great. Absolutely.
Okay, sounds good. Once again, everybody, you're listening to Inside the Matrix, and today's guest, Geraldine Orozco, will be back in just a few. Stay tuned.
This is Inside the Matrix, hosted by Jimmy Brent.
Who are we talking about?
Jimmy Brent. Jimmy Brent. Jimmy Brent. Live every Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern.
All right, welcome back to Inside the Matrix. In case you've just joined us, our guest today is Geraldine Orozco, and we're having a fascinating conversation. And where we left off, we were talking about the possible interface of some of these dark entities, and draconians probably in particular, with our world governments, and that possible relation to psychopathy, which we see so prevalent in politicians, global corporation leaders of all sorts. Anyway, there's plenty of psychopaths to go around the world. So I'm curious about how that could possibly be interrelated.
Okay. Well, obviously, it's a very important question right now because, we're all trying to figure out what's up, what's down at this point with so much information going on. There's a lot of confusion. And I'd like to start this very important part sharing how I came across all this information for myself. In 2017, when I had my regression, one of the things that was shown to me in my regression is a map of this world and the origins of DNA and how those genetically modified lineages were passed down through historical timeline to create the human race which we are now. And this information was basically stemming from the concept of 3 original lineages. One that was a draconian lineage, one that is a reptilian, and one that is a humanoid lineage. And the 3 of these lineages were then genetically modified to create what we now know as the human race. And through history, all of these were originating in Mesopotamia. And for me, my experience began in Jordan, literally in Petra. And from there, this information was then taken out to Europe, through Italy, up into, through Rome, through, the UK and out to the US, up to the North Europe, to Germany to Russia, then down through Africa, down through the Asias, and then to the Americas. And so the race was then created stemming from that original origin. And what I saw is that these original lineages, which they spent a lot of time in preserving, a lot of these main lineages, bloodlines, into what we now know as the ruling bloodlines of our reality. Now, when I first came across this information, I knew absolutely nothing of any of this. And when I saw this in the regression, I decided to go into really deep research to try to understand what that actually meant. And what I found was just astonishing. I mean, if we simply look at the fact that 147 companies are running this world, they are running this entire globe. Okay, then you look at, well, who's running those 147 companies? Okay, and what you're going to find yourself with is specific family lineages that are owning and running and funding, financially fueling these businesses. So when you look at our reality, this matrix, so-called matrix that we are living in, how did we end up at this point in our reality that we are all being run by a couple companies that are basically defining our culture, what we're eating, the pharmaceutical industry, our education. I mean, they are the ones that are creating our structured reality. As I mentioned earlier, this compartmentalized reality that we live in is being compartmentalized and created and designed by these companies, and we are basically fueling this system, obviously with our contribution, with our dollar, with our understanding of our reality. So that is huge in itself. And when I understood that, I mean, it really just made me question. My paradigm was shifted completely, because the question was, well, who am I serving at this point? Yep. Every single one of my dollars, everything that I buy, everything that I invest in is now serving these specific, agendas here, these companies, these lineages, these very designed kind of lifestyles and reality that we live in. So the thing is that if you question that even further, you will see that these companies are funded by 11 major banks, the majority of which are in China, and those are also owned by very few specific lineages. So what we're looking at here is a bigger issue. We're looking at very carefully designed reality in which our DNA, the genetic code that we hold on to, was genetically modified since the origin of time, holding on to designer information. And the lineages that are in the ruling class of our world, of this reality, are specifically genetically modified for that purpose, in order to carry out specific agendas, in order to carry out this compartmentalized, controlled system in which we live in. And, the information is out there. All of it is very open. If you just go in and do very simple research, you can very easily find this. And this understanding of reality goes all the way back to the very origin of time. I mean, we have traces of this information dating all the way back in several ancient cultures, from Sumer, from even the Incas, from the Mayans, from Mesopotamia, from the Hindu, from the ancient Chinese and Japanese cultures. I mean, the origins of this information we have inscripted in ancient texts and also, our petroglyphs. There is so much to be understood here. It would literally rewrite history. So this information made more sense to me as I experienced other things in my experience, such as a MyLab. And the reason why I want to bring in the concept of a MyLab is because it was in that experience that I understood what the link is between these so-called bloodlines that are running our reality and our extraterrestrial or seemingly extraterrestrial, counterparts or these beings that are sharing this reality. This happened of summer of last year, and I was in Colorado, and I was sharing Airbnb as I was speaking at a conference in Colorado, And I was taken underground with two other of my colleagues that were speaking at the conference, and I was taken to an underground base. And I got to tell you, I mean, it was just unbelievable. I mean, the only way I realized that this happened was that I woke up at like 4 something, screaming something out, and I was in a room with two of my colleagues at the time. And after later discussing that what had occurred, a couple of days later with one of the colleagues, she had woken up exactly at the same time, and we started to share our dream, which was of course a nightmare, which we were in an underground base, and there was a man, in a medical, jacket coming up to us with a syringe that he was going to inject into the body. And we had the exact same dream. So after that experience, through regression, I identified the location of this base and the department and who was running this entire program. And what I identified was that it was a nuclear, it was a biological nuclear defense department. And the levels of clearance to be able to come into this underground base are so far above the president. In other words, these are just very, very different agendas, very select underground programs that are being carried out. And the purpose is, of course, similar to the hybridization program in the sense that there is a cloning that is being occurred by the removal of our genetic material. But in this case, they were removing information from the back of my spine, from my spinal cord. It was like a spinal tap. And it was so painful that I couldn't walk for like 3 months. But the link between the government and the draconians was made very clear to me through that experience, because they were managing and overseeing this specific agenda that I was a part of, that I had been made to participate from.
Are you aware of any frequency blocks that they physically put up to keep people from sort of becoming aware of their, basically what they're doing to all of us?
Yes. Absolutely, and this spinal tap that they did on my body to remove information was also an opportunity for them to put implants into the body. And what I realized is that first of all, I wasn't the only one. It was me and two other people that were there sharing the Airbnb. But these are programs that are being carried out on a massive scale, and the signs to identify that is something that I'm assisting in researching. But the technology that is being implanted into the body is made to disable how the system works. I talked earlier about how we had the chakra systems connected to the endocrine system, but anything that is attached to the endocrine system to disrupt the endocrine system is going to create a complete imbalance in the entire neural system of the body.
Yeah.
So, it affects tremendously. And I mean, programs can be put in and out of the body. They can be programs that can be more towards focused on the sensory body, which means that you are more engaged into the emotional sensory matrix. You're engaging with the experiences from a more emotional perspective. People end up with depression, with anger issues, with a range of things. And those are just very simple examples, just to show you, what are the results of these implants. But they can impact your life on a physical level, all the way from emotional to illnesses that are being implanted into the physical body. And the purpose is to disable the body in such a way where when somebody is coming into this information or coming into this level of consciousness, it has been stalled to slow down the progression of that. I mean, what we're looking at here is not just these MyLab experiences, though, but what I'm talking about is something that is occurring on a massive scale. It's the genetic modification that is being occurred from the food that we're eating, from either chemtrails with nanotechnology that's being sprayed on the physical body and is being absorbed into the physical body to genetically modify slowly the humans and their ability to activate the higher aspects of their physical body. So, I mean, the level of technology that is being put out here is something that we are very far away from understanding. It's something that is so subtle, from the food that we're eating for a very long time, to what it is now. And I mean, what comes next is we're coming into this merge of humanoids and technology. You know, that's what we're doing. We're melding into that merge of technology and humans.
We can see it.
You know, that's right. We can see it everywhere. And you see a lot of these films that are coming out now talking about these things. I feel like the film industry is very, very good at kind of putting out these little things to maybe desynthesize our ability to register that as reality. But it's a mirror. It's a mirror of what's actually occurring in our present world, in our reality, and it's something that we need to start paying attention to.
Yeah.
You know? And how do we change that is by healing our body, by activating and understanding how this technology operates, so that we can begin to disconnect from the matrix, from this system that is basically working through our body to engage us into certain states of being, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really obvious that where this is all going is this whole transhumanist agenda,
Mm-hmm.
where at some point I feel like they want to very much depopulate the human population, and those that stick around will be introduced to, oh, we've got this fantastic cyborg. We'll download your brain and put it into this synthetic being, clone, whatever they call it, and you'll live forever. And I really think that they've actually enticed many of the politicians and people of that ilk by promising those types of things to them, that they will be able to live forever with this technology that they have. And technocracy, the whole idea of taking over the world using technology, has been around for a long, long time. There are several really good documentaries describing exactly how this is being implemented and how it's being done. And you can literally see it. And like you said, the movies are a reflection of what's happening. And I think in a lot of ways it's predictive programming as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. I mean, and transhumanism, the concept of that is something that's been cycling on our planet for many times. I mean, our civilizations have reached very high levels of technology, of understanding, and then they were, eliminated. And I don't necessarily tend to think that the end goal is to eliminate the human race, because if you understand how these draconian agenda is carrying out, I mean, they need the human race. This is basically a lifeline for them. We're talking about, and I don't want to say this in a term where you're going to categorize these draconians as good and bad, because we need to be able to look beyond that. What we're talking about is consciousness. And when consciousness decides to not become aware of itself, when it rejects itself, it becomes parasitic. And that's what is happening in the cases of these low-frequency entities, these beings, these manifestations of consciousness. They are becoming, they are rejecting their consciousness, becoming parasitic, so they require the lifeline of any external organism to assist them in continuing their existence. So in that same way, humans are basically being put on this planet, and we are cycled through these simulations of lifetimes in which we are expelling emotional expression. We are, having all these sensory experiences, high and low. But our lifespans are a manufactured illusion to assist in, utilizing our life force as a food source, basically, for these beings.
Loosh,
And,
right?
Right. You can use that term loosh. Absolutely. That was, used for that. But, this is actually occurring not just on our planet. It's happening on many other planets. I mean, it's a living organism it's a multiverse. And in the multiverse, we are sharing simultaneously all these experiences, where these agendas are being carried out on more than one level. And so ultimately, what the invitation is and what the power that the human has in this limited timeline is the ability as infinite consciousness to become aware of itself in order to not become parasitic, such as these other low frequency entities and manifestations. When the human becomes aware of itself, it has the ability to choose its experience. And consciousness isn't just done in present time, in waking time. It's done in dream time. It's done in death. And that's something that we learn from the ancient cultures, like the ancient Egyptians, like many ancient cultures that have practiced for centuries the ability to navigate other dimensions like death, like dream time. That is where the human and where our technology is now being led to. The invitation is to come into those dimensions and to learn how to manage and control them, so that when you die, you are not just this consciousness that's going to be sucked back into this cyclical reincarnation cycle. Instead, as consciousness, you're going to have the awareness to be able to move and to experience other aspects, of consciousness.
And this
ultimately, yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say that I think the powers that be, whoever and whatever they are definitely trying to distract us from exactly doing that, becoming aware of our beingness, of our divine self, the true source of who we are. They're trying to distract us in every possible way, through our schooling, through various religions, gurus, you name it, media, all kinds of entertainment and distractions, so that we occupy our conscious mind all the time. We never take the time to slow down and actually, connect with who we actually are. Yes,
that's absolutely right. And that's the biggest agenda that we need to be aware of more than anything. And you're right. Even gurus, it's really important to point that out, because especially right now, we have a lot of confusion in even our spiritual community. We are so lost because we're afraid, because we doubt what's happening. But we are always looking outside of ourselves for those answers, for somebody to lead us, and that's a part of the programming of this matrix. We really need to understand that the answers are inside, that we need to take time to reconnect with the body, get acquainted with this physical body, so we can understand how the multiverse works. Because again, you are a fractal of infinite consciousness, and the structure of reality in your body is the same as it is in this multiverse. It's the same function.
So the goal is, be the captain of your own ship. Be the creator of your own destiny. Don't let anybody or anything else get in the way of your connection with who you actually are, your beingness. And to me, that pretty much is the essence of what we're here to do, is to make that realization that we are so much more than our ego, than our waking mind, that we exist, our personality. We are infinite beings. And once you connect with that and you are able to tap into that wisdom, that's the ultimate way to live your life, I feel, anyway.
Right. I agree. And the work is really, it's heavy, it's heavy. As we're doing, this cleanup work that we're doing, cleaning up our triggers, our pain body, that's how you transform from this heavy physical dimensional body into what the spiritual community wants to call, high vibration, become a light body. How do we become that light body? We become a light body by transforming the information that we're holding on to in the body. You're changing the frequency of that information. Right now, a lot of our traumas and our pains are basically stored within the physical body, and they dictate our frequency. So if we start to clean all of that up, then an opening is created and the ability to transform that information. And little by little, the body then becomes to rebalance itself, because right now, this world and everything around us, everything that is, all these systems that are being run, everything is completely inverted in such a deep way, in such a complex way, that in order to understand what's real anymore, I mean, it really requires you to understand what is real in you. That means that you have to dissect your concepts of everything, concepts of love, concepts of reality, concepts of our system, our family, our government, what is education, what is health. I mean, everything has to be addressed to come into this complete state. And the best example of health is going to be nature, the natural balance of yin and yang. You know, that coming into that very complete balanced homeostasis. That's what we want to achieve. And if we can keep just that thought in all the different realms of everything, it'll really help simplify, you know, the confusion, and that'll come naturally through your intuitive form, because when the body is healthy, it's balanced. And
absolutely.
And that's the kind of balance that we want to have in all perceptions. Yes.
Okay, you're listening to Inside the Matrix with today's guest, Geraldine Orozco. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Inside the Matrix. Inside the Matrix with Jimmy Brent. Broadcasting to you live from the neon capital of the world.
Welcome to the desert of the real.
Your ambassador to the unknown and host of Inside the Matrix, Jimmy Brent. Jimmy Brent. Jimmy Brent. Jimmy Brent. Jimmy Brent.
All right, welcome back to Inside the Matrix. And today we're here with our guest, Geraldine Orozco, and we're having a fascinating conversation. This is our final segment. And just want to remind everybody, as you just heard there, if you have a question, you can call into the show. Or if you want to jump in the chat, you can put a question in there and we'll try and respond to those. And Geraldine, let's just talk about mindfulness and maybe some ways that people can heal themselves as well, or begin the healing process.
Absolutely. That's such a great question. I love ending with this because, you know, after we hear so many complex ideas and topics, it always leaves us sometimes questioning our reality and how to integrate all of this information. And I find it so important to link and all of the understanding of all of these things, of who we are. But as humans, I mean, the way we work is that we are like sponges, you know, throughout our day, since from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, we are constantly absorbing everything around us, all of our experiences, emotions, and all of those things are being filtered through our perception. And our perceptions are created by our learned experiences of the past, either as children or as events that happened as adults. And so what ends up happening is that we get stuck. You know, we get stuck in certain perceptions, certain limited thought programs that don't allow us to see beyond what we're feeling and experiencing. And that can be very limiting for our progress, for our healing. And over time, what ends up happening is that we get blocked. We feel completely blocked, like we can't move forward. So for me, one of the most important things is that as we're becoming aware of ourselves on a daily basis, and of course we hear the term, you know, be in the present moment. It's become such a huge cliche, but the power of being in the present moment allows you to navigate what's happening in this moment, in this time, in this space, instead of pulling from past experiences or from future fears, you know, or thoughts of what could happen. And that there is a tremendous power in being in the present moment, not just from the perspective of observation, of being an observer of what's happening around you, but also becoming aware of how your body is really interacting with your environment. And it's something that we are not taught in school. It's not something that we're trained to learn at any point, really, until we start to question our reality, because we start to realize that the old ways of being are no longer working. You know, they're no longer functioning. They create more pain and suffering in our life than growth, than nourishment. And that's where we can start to see that there are red flags in the way that we're interacting with the world around us. So on a daily basis, as we're interacting, questioning what our emotions, where our emotions are coming from. And this is a really key question, because a lot of times what we'll find out after we question this is that some of these emotions are either programs that we're either provided by our matrix, or what the world around us told us, like the systems of society, the structure of our family, the way that our religion has brought programming into our mind about how we should interrelate with things and people and our emotions. So all of those programs can be very limiting, and a lot of time we realize that they're not congruent with how we truly feel. So then there is this rift between how we are truly authentically feeling and how we believe we should feel. So that's where we start to kind of see that there's a break there. And this is also highlighting our triggers. So the more and more we become aware of our emotions and how we're interacting with the world around us, we can then catch those triggering points. The triggers allow us to understand, where we are having those rifts between our beliefs and our true emotions. So how do we heal this? I mean, we have this emotional trigger, we have this thought program that's not really in alignment with how we're truly feeling, and there's a discrepancy there. So the key to healing is to understand what our true beliefs are. And there's a certain set of core beliefs and core ethics that are not taught in this matrix. They're not taught through our parents. They're not taught through our religions, our education, anywhere. The only way we are going to be able to identify where our true core beliefs are by identifying for ourselves what each emotion is. We have to relearn what emotions are to us. What is happiness? A lot of us, we don't even know what happiness is. I mean, I have clients that I work with on a daily basis internationally, and sometimes I ask them, come into a state of love. And they tell me, I don't know what love is. I don't know what that feels like. So how did we get to this point in our society when we don't know what love is? We don't know what it is to feel joy anymore. That really says something about this, convoluted reality that we live in. And the invitation is to become aware of what that means. Go back to basics. Go back to your original beliefs in what joy was. Question whether joy is what your matrix is telling you. Sometimes the matrix says, oh, joy and success is, the cars, the house, the, beautiful partner. All of these things that are external to us are programmed in our mind to believe that is what is supposed to cause us joy. But the truth is that joy can be something so simple. It can be the appreciation of, a flower or a scenery, or a rebalancing of yourself, coming into a state of peace, for example, that causes joy. So those things are going to be very foreign from us if we're not constantly connecting with ourselves and our experiences. If we're constantly in a state of action and reaction to our environment, we're going to be more engaged in the physical and the sensory part of our body than what we truly, truly feel. So, presence is a big topic. It's a complex topic. And what the invitation for healing is how to deprogram from all of the programs that are false, that are untrue. That's what assisted me in my journey. My total goal was, what is the ultimate truth of everything? Is it true that when I act this way, I am a bad person? Is it true that when I feel this way about someone, it makes me, wrong, or it makes me feel bad, or it's actually incorrect? What is the truth of these emotions and these expressions of ourselves? And what you'll find is that at the core, once again, as I mentioned earlier, it's finding balance in those emotions, finding this complete integration of what we believe is good and bad. When you go through this process, you no longer have to compartmentalize between what's good, what's bad. That becomes integrated because you understand that everything requires both aspects of duality for healing. And that's true for every organism in this matrix multiverse. In order to come into a complete homeostasis, into this balanced state, it's the integration of the two that the understanding of the two. So that's what health is. In the healing modality that I do, DNA reprogramming, I scan the body for any blockages, any entities, any attachments, and I work with my clients to identify them and to remove it from their body one by one with them, training them how to identify, how to feel the programs that we're creating, those blockages. And I mean, the work, it's, we go in really deep to a lot of these kinds of very sensitive topics. I mean, everything from trauma to, some physical ailment that is happening in their body. And everything can be healed because we are like computing systems. If our algorithm reads a certain way, that's what we're going to produce. But our existence consists of many influences, and one of those is as infinite consciousness becoming aware of itself, we are here to experience all aspects of reality, whether they're low, whether they're high. We need to experience all ranges of existence. So when you look at it from that perspective, there is no shame or guilt in lower experiences. And that's kind of what I would like to invite, everyone to kind of come into a new way of looking at things, is to find balance in their perspectives.
Sure. And now, would you say that we come into this world with an intent or a certain direction that we want to accomplish in this lifetime, or is it more of a random thing that we just kind of adapt as we go and learn according to some instinctual process, or how do you feel that works?
I think that as the only purpose that we're here as infinite consciousness is to become aware of yourself. And we become aware of ourselves through experience. So we're here to experience the ranges of all these things that we're, our life stories. And I think when we enter the three-dimensional reality, which is what we can call the matrix, we are attaching to the matrix, to the laws of the matrix, which are to learn and to experience through the sensory body. And the way that the human experiences through the sensory body is through emotions. So we are brought into experiences that cause emotions, that trigger thought forms, that trigger learning and experiences that help the human evolve on the highest level. However, if this consciousness is not becoming aware of themselves through those experiences, if they're not understanding and learning and growing from those experiences, a stagnation occurs. And that's where consciousness is not becoming aware of itself, and it then becomes self-destructive, and it can create an illness and die, or come into these cyclical patterns of pain and suffering. So the stories that we come into are a combination of our ancestral lineage and all the information that's produced through our genetic information. And all of those things are kind of brought into us by the patterns that are brought down cyclically from our ancestral lineages. So all of the traumas that your great-great-great-great-grandfather has not healed through the different manifestations of consciousness that come in through family. So for example, what I mean by manifestations of consciousness, I mean the grandfather is then coming in as the mother, coming in as the son, the brother. We are connected in these network lineages. And as we re-enter the matrix in different manifestations of consciousness, we are living out those patterns of information that are in our genetic lineage until it is cleaned up, until it is healed. So each manifestation of life, each new reincarnation in that lineage is an opportunity to clean that lineage. That's why healing now is so important. If I clean up my trauma about, let's say, sexual abuse, it's going to clean up the trauma that goes back to my grandmother and her grandmother and her grandmother before that, because we are cleaning that information that's coming down our lineage. So this is how we clean. And so when we come in, we think that we have karma, but karma, really what that means is the information patterns that we are reliving through generation. So we have to clear all of that up in order to come into that whole. When you clean all that up, you no longer are triggered by anything that you are presented with in this reality. You change, you become a master of your body and of the experience that you're now projecting, instead of, let's say, a victim, or, you are coming into these cyclical patterns of pain. You're no longer in that cyclical pattern anymore.
And we could potentially be clearing our own trauma from a previous life that we had, right?
Absolutely. And so if you go back to the image that I was giving you, that example of a spider web, and you are at the center, in this present moment, right now, you, me, all the listeners are in the center of that spider web. Let's say something happens around us that triggers pain in us, like someone gives us a dirty look, so we feel insignificant. That the filing cabinet is going to go back to a file that is matching that experience and how to react to that experience. That filing cabinet holds on to all of the fragments of yourself in that spider web that surrounds you, which is not a linear timeline. It is a simultaneous timeline. So we pull from all of those experiences. So, for example, a past life when you were in Egypt, for example, you trigger the pain in that experience. So your subconscious mind goes back to that fragment of yourself, pulls from that information, and brings it into the now. And so this means that you have an opportunity to heal that cyclical program, not only for yourself here and now, but for all of the fragments that are living simultaneously in those timelines. So when we talk about past life, they're not really past; they're actually simultaneous. That's what I mean to say.
Yeah, that's a mind-bending concept, isn't it? But it's great, and it makes sense. But before, we're getting short on time, and I don't want to neglect to talk about your new movie that you have coming out, and different projects that you may have going on, and things that you're involved with. So please share with us on those.
Thank you so much. So right now, I'm really excited to share with you Extraordinary Speeding by J3 Films. And this film is about the hybridization program. And I'm really excited to share about that as it goes really deep. It actually won 13 awards up until now for Best Film, Best Director. Wow. So we are just so proud about that on a topic that is so controversial. So it means that people are ready to listen, ready to look into that. And you can check out the trailer for that on J3 Films. It will be out September 3rd in all major viewing platforms. And I am really happy to announce that I'll be speaking at a couple upcoming conferences, so I really hope to see you there. I will be at International UFO Congress September 4th to the 8th in Phoenix, Arizona, and you can check out ufocongress.com. And I'll be speaking at UFO Mega Congress in Laughlin, Nevada, February 16th to the 22nd in February. So I'm really excited. You can reach me to do a DNA reprogramming, my website at GeraldineOrozco.com. I work one-on-one internationally through Skype or in person. That has to be scheduled and arranged. And you can also check out if you are a hybrid experiencer, if you are a hybrid parent, believe that you're a hybrid parent. You can join my support group. It's international at hybridmother.com. We meet once a month to discuss experiences, talk about support, and anything that may assist you in the integration of your information and understanding. So thank you so much for having me on the show. It was a great pleasure, Jimmy, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah. So we've got a few minutes left. So
good.
So what are you currently more involved with these days? Are you doing more conferences? And you were writing as well, right? Were you working on a book, or are you working on a book?
Yes, I am working on a book. And this book it's going to be a 3-part book. Talks about, the historical timeline of how the genetic modification on our planet Earth resulted in the human race that we're in. So that's kind of what I'm working on. And my original presentation, DNA Origins and the Hybridization and Ascension Program, focuses on that. That's what one of them is going to be about. I'm also going to be focusing on understanding the hybridization program and my own personal experiences, which are many. a lot of my regressions are actually public, so you're welcome to see them, and I invite you to please see them so you can learn a little bit about this experience. You can check out Alba Weinman's YouTube channel, who was the regressionist that assisted me in that.
How do you spell that?
And she, Alba Weinman, it's ALBA, Weinman, WEINMAN. And she's on YouTube, and it's regression 133 and 331 most recently, and 7. I think it's 785, I believe. But I can share it with you later, and you can share with her. It's all on my website.
Sure.
And my website, once again, is GeraldineOrozco.com, and that's GeraldineOrozco, OROZCO.com. So that's where you can reach me. I'm also speaking at conferences, and really happy to speak, especially about this hybridization topic. Yeah.
I've got another question that somebody's asking about, and can you give us an idea about the ships that you've seen, the different craft that you've seen, and are they huge? Are they small? Are they interdimensional? Do they have some kind of propulsion system, or is this just a frequency shifting type craft, or how does some of that work?
Yeah. Okay. So you can see the regressions, and I go really in detail to the description of the ships, of the craft. But my abduction in 2013 was basically a lenticular craft. And very interesting, the material that it's made out of, it's like a metallic, but it's like a translucent metallic, which leads me to understand that it's more like a vibrational type of a substance, that's the best way I can describe it. Another craft that I was on was a hybridization ship, and this is more of a honeycomb shape. It has many levels to it, and different departments that are all focused on the hybridization program. There is a level for, where they have a laboratory where they're carrying out the genetic modifications. There's another a level where basically it's like, I guess the closest thing I can describe it is like a maternity ward where, the mothers are being brought in and removed of, the fetuses and the babies. There's another level where it's like a nursery, where they recreate an environment of a nursery where there is a connection being created between the mothers and children, and so on and so forth, and other areas that are for any kinds of examination and implantation or procedures. Now, what is interesting is that this craft is basically, in a sense, telepathically navigated by the main craft, which in my particular experience was a draconian mothership. And the draconian mothership is basically like a spherical craft, which is ginormous craft, and basically looks like its own city. And it has many, many layers to it, and it has some kind of how do I call it, like a spiraling generator, or like a centrifugal type of force in the center of the core of this spherical craft that keeps it moving. It's like generating this energy that keeps it moving. I'm imagining that it creates its own toroidal field, the craft itself, for its movement. It's very interesting. But how I know that is because being on the craft, I mean, the vibration that you feel there is just, it's horrific. Like if I mentioned earlier, if you can imagine all the most horrible things, that's how it feels to be on the craft. That's just the vibrational that they're reading at. Vibrating it doesn't mean that that's actually what's occurring there. But it's also run by military-like personnel. So you're going to see a lot of these, beings and reptilian or draconian type species dressed in what looks like military clothing.
And I'm sure there's some ships where there's a whole different vibe or frequency that's much better as well, right?
Exactly. And so that I was just going to go to the last one, which was more high frequency. And, these are more humanoid type of crafts, and also maybe like Pleiadian or some other kind of race where they are carrying out. And it can be a combination of grays and other kind of beings like mantid as well. I mean, I've been on crafts where there were something that looks like a council, which technically I'm participating in. So many kind of crafts like this. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Geraldine. We're going to have you back if we can, because we've got so much more to talk about. It's been a great show and a great honor to have you on the show. Once again, this is Inside the Matrix. Tune in to us next week. We'll be back again.
This is Inside the Matrix, hosted by Jimmy Brent.
Who are we talking about?
Jimmy Brent. Jimmy Brent. Jimmy Brent. Live every Sunday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
It is worldwide.
Broadcasting from an undisclosed location deep within the neon capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. For more information on the host and the show, please visit InsideTheMatrix.org. That's InsideTheMatrix.org. It's time to break the chains of manipulated consciousness and claim our true nature as creative divine beings. Inside the Matrix. Inside the Matrix.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.